everybody. Welcome to the Left Field Media presents Star Trek Voyager, celebrating 25 years of epic quests. I'm Amy Imhoff. I'm going to be hosting today, and I am super thrilled to have all of these fabulous panelists here with me. I'd like everyone to I'm going to introduce you and then say a little bit about yourself, say how you came into Star Trek and, where your love of the series came from, and, then we're going to kick it off. So I'm going to go to Kayla LaFrance first. Kayla works for NASA, and she is a badass lady of STEM. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about what she does.
Okay, hello. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Kayla LaFrance. I work at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I work in mission control. The easiest way to describe my job is the crew breaks something, I get to tell them how to fix it. I am called an OSO, and that is our job. So if you've watched Apollo 13, think of putting the square filter in the round receptacle using only the tools available to the crew. That's what I do every day. I love it. It's a lot of challenging fun. I started watching Star Trek when I was like a 2 or 3 year old. I had an older sibling into Star Trek, and I grew up with it. And it really sparked my love of science, and that's where I ended up going into engineering and doing what I do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go over to Kira Knotts. Kira prefers they, them pronouns, just for the awareness of our audience and our panelists. And Kira, please tell us about your awesome job at the New York Aquarium as a marine biologist.
So I work at the New York Aquarium down on Coney Island here in New York City, down in Brooklyn. And I am a shark keeper. And what that means is I am responsible for the care and maintenance of all of our sharks, rays, and other teleosts or fish in our galleries. And basically, these are my non-human coworkers. They are ambassadors to their counterparts in the wild. And so I get to care for and maintain them and educate the public on why sharks are so important to our ocean's ecosystems. I grew up with Star Trek. My dad is a huge Trekkie. He's kind of the Trek head of the family. So I was practically born into it, and it has only evolved over time. So it's been a big part of my life. You could probably say I was inspired by Star Trek 4 or the one with the whales, although I kind of geared towards sharks rather than whales, but it still works. So cetacean ops, more like shark ops, you name it. You got it.
Thank you so much, Kira. We also have with us Dr. Lucila Rosines, who is joining us from Houston, Texas also. We are actually in 4 different time zones in 2 different countries for this panel, so this is pretty awesome. We could pull together this event. So, Lucy, why don't you tell us how you came into Star Trek and why you love it and what your job is all about now?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. So I am a pediatric radiologist. It just means that I analyze, interpret imaging for kids. I also do adults, but for more clarification, kind of x-rays, MRI, CTs, ultrasounds, the doctor has to look at those images, come up with the report, help the doctor who ordered it figure out what's wrong and kind of how to move on from there. So that's what I do. And I came onto Star Trek watching Voyager. It was actually the first Star Trek that I saw and that I sort of saw on my own. I kind of seen the original series because my mom kind of was into that one more, but I just gravitated to Voyager. I'll speak about it a little bit more later, but because of the character of B'Elanna Torres, I saw myself in her, and then I just hooked. So that's how I came to love Voyager.
Awesome. Thank you. We also have with us from Star Trek Online, Thomas Marrone, who is the lead Starship designer, and he gets to play with Star Trek starships all day long, which is super great. So tell us a little bit about how you came into Star Trek and about your awesome job.
Yeah, so like Amy said, I'm the lead ship artist for Star Trek Online. I manage an art team, a few artists strong, and some of our outsourcing partners. And we make 3D models of Star Trek ships that go into the game that our players can fly. I've been a Star Trek fan pretty much my whole life. I inherited it from my mom, who would watch, she watched the original series when it was on the air in the 60s and when it was syndicated. And so when the Next Generation came out, she made sure to indoctrinate me with that as well. So Star Trek is very tied to family for me. It's something that, my family did together and something we still talk about and enjoy together.
That's awesome. And from the Star Trek family, the Voyager crew, the one and only forever ensign, Garrett Wang is with us today. Hi, Garrett.
Hi.
Welcome to the panel. Let's talk a little bit about what 25 years of Voyager has meant to you this last crazy weird year that we've had.
Yeah, let me go back a little bit, and I want to kind of answer how everyone else answered how they got into Star Trek. So I watched Star Trek, the original series in rerun when I came home from school in grade school. But my very first sci-fi that I saw was 1977 Star Wars, and I believe that you can be a fan of both. There doesn't have to be any type of animosity between one fandom and the other. But I saw 1977 Star Wars in the movie theater, and after that, I watched everything sci-fi. So Star Wars got me hooked, but I've always been a Star Trek fan as well. I love Star Trek 4, the movie, the same movie that Kira loves. And a recent fact that I found out not too long ago, really only maybe a few years ago, my mom told me that when she was pregnant with me, that the only show that she watched was original series Star Trek. That was it. So the entire time she watched television, it was only Star Trek. And while I'm in the womb gestating, I think I heard "Beam Me Up." I heard all the sounds, and so it was very familiar to me. And that's probably what set me up for auditioning and winning the job of Ensign Kim, because it was in my bones from a very, very, very young age. In fact, just as a fetus, I was already kind of exposed to it.
Doesn't Harry Kim have that line? It's like, I remember being in my mother's womb.
Yes. How crazy is that, Kira? That line is written, and this fact about my mom watching this while she was pregnant with me didn't come out until 3 years ago, which is well after the end of Voyager, right? So to have Harry Kim have that line, I remember what it's like being in my mother's womb. And Paris gives me that look like, no, you don't. And then Kim, yeah, you do. So apropos. Back to your other question, though, of 25 years of Star Trek Voyager, it really does seem like it was yesterday. It's just insane that we've already have 2.5 decades from the year that we premiered, January 16th on a Monday, 1995 on UPN Network, United Paramount Network.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the flagship show for UPN.
Yeah.
So yeah, and actually we have a very interesting dichotomy here, which is that Kira just turned 26. So we have the next generation is now on this panel discussing Voyager with Ensign Harry Kim, and I think that that's a great bookend that we have, within our group of panelists. But I would really love to start talking about the theme of this weekend for Left Field is epic quests, and Voyager is totally an epic quest. They have this incredible. They're thrown all these light years away from the world that we know, which is actually really interesting for the people who created Star Trek, because they then get to do world building in the Delta Quadrant. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the epic quest and how world building works from an acting point of view, and then from a viewer point of view, and then Thomas from a creative point of view when you're rebuilding those worlds within Star Trek Online. So maybe Thomas, you can kick us off first by talking a little bit about world building and the creative challenges you face when you go into an environment like that.
Yeah, Star Trek Online is a massively multiplayer game where people kind of create their own Star Trek crew, their own ship, and then they fly around and experience missions. And so the way that I describe it to people is sort of like a Star Trek theme park. Like I can go over to the original series land, or I can go over to DS9 land, or I can go to Voyager land. And so we recreated a strip of the Delta Quadrant for to have these missions inspired by the events that you saw in Star Trek Voyager. So the setting of Star Trek Online is about 30 years after the events of Voyager, really only 10 years after the events of Star Trek Picard now. But Star Trek Picard, of course, wasn't on the air when we did Delta Rising, which was our Voyager-themed content. And so the idea was that we would cherry pick some of the most interesting threads in Voyager and kind of tie them together and create new stories around them. And since Voyager was an episodic show, there actually were a lot of really interesting aliens and cultures and events that you don't quite know how they got resolved. A major one for us was the Vaadwaur, which were these kind of belligerent, militaristic aliens who at one point I think had a great big empire, but then they were defeated, and then they went to into hibernation, and Voyager woke them up again. I think 7 woke them up, and so we in Star Trek Online follow that thread. It's like, well, it's been 30 years since the Vaadwaur came back. What happened? What was the consequence of that action? And there are a lot of those kind of threads that we weave together. Another one is the Kabali, and this actually, I want to send this over to Garrett because we took a storyline from early in Voyager, scene where Harry Kim actually dies in the episode Deadlock. He gets sucked out of a hull breach, and then later on in the series, Voyager encounters the alien culture that can reanimate dead bodies, and that's how they reproduce. And so we brought Garrett to reprise his role as now Captain Harry Kim, and but who encountered a Kabali version of himself. So I don't know if Garrett, if you want to talk about that experience and picking up that thread.
Yeah, I would love to hear Garrett talk about that.
Well, what's so great about Star Trek Online is that, at least when it comes to Star Trek Voyager, there's so many untied storylines, and things that you're always wondering, what happened to those aliens, and what happened with so really there's quite a wealth of material for Star Trek Online creators to continue with. And I really, when I got the call from Star Trek Online and they said, hey, we want to do this Delta Quadrant expansion, sort of focusing on Voyager characters, I was thrilled. And the whole use of the Vaadwaur, the Kabali, to me, it was just, I've told people this. I've said the creators of Star Trek Online could have written for Voyager easily, no problem. And in fact, some of their storylines are better than some of the episodes of Voyager, I'm going to say.
I thought we were going to be talking about lizard babies.
All right. I'm not going to talk about lizard babies right now. I will say
it's an Emmy award-winning episode, for the
record. But it's really an honor to be able to be featured in Star Trek Online, especially since they promoted me, and nobody in the real show promoted me, but Star Trek Online promoted me. So thank God I got to become a captain. And really doing that voiceover, I think, Thomas, is this correct? Was it just Denise Crosby and I were the only 2 Star Trek actors that came up to the headquarters to do voiceover? Is that right? Where everyone else was remote?
At that time, yeah.
At that time, yeah. And I had a blast because they showed me all around headquarters over there at Cryptic, and I literally, of all the voiceover jobs I've done, that was the most fun because I got to play Captain Kim. So I had a Captain Kim voice, a little bit more gravelly, a little more weathered. I had Ensign Kim, so I got to go back in time and do my Ensign Kim voice, and not to be a spoiler, but Evil Kim, I got to play that voice as well. And it was such a wonderful voiceover session. I remember the Thomas, do you remember the director of that voiceover? I don't know what his name is right now.
Michael Henry might have been the guy we were working with. Who's our main audio guy. We also have Al Rivera, right, who's our lead designer.
Yeah, Al wasn't in the room. It was probably Michael. Yeah. Okay. Well, when we ended that, he really gave me one of the highest compliments. He said that was one of the best voiceover sessions he's ever presided over, and I was so happy to hear that. I was like, yes, because to delineate between the 3 different types of Harrys, I had to do 3 different voices, really, and to get that. And of course,
it's really cool that you got to explore those other dimensions of him.
Yes, most definitely, for sure.
So many years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to hear from the other panelists and hear what are some of your favorite epic moments from Voyager that you think were really, the world building was really well done, the creative team really went beyond and branched out and really brought us some excellent episodes. Let's go to Kayla first.
I'm on the hot seat. Oh God,
it's okay.
One moment.
You don't have to pick one. Just pick. It doesn't have to be like your favorite. It can just be one that you felt really hit you. One that was really like, oh, that was so great.
Of course, now I'm going to forget the name of the episode.
While you're thinking, I can mention something that one of my favorite episodes is Ashes to Ashes, and that's a great episode for Harry as well. And
Yeah.
Lindsay Ballard comes back, and this is a friend of his that she had died, and then they had, like you said, they had reanimated her, and she had become this other alien, and it was just a really interesting journey for her, and it was nice to have the perspective of somebody who actually wasn't somebody that was on the crew all the time, right? It was somebody who kind of came in and gave a face and a voice to a regular crew member of Voyager that was along for the journey, but we didn't necessarily get to visit her life and her experiences while on the ship. We only saw her after, but I think you had great chemistry with that actress, and it was just a really great storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually brought her back to STO as well to play her Kabali character. She came back. I forget the name of that Kabali character, but it was fun having her interact with the two versions of Harry.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Kayla, I gave you a brief moment. It's your turn.
I guess one that I do like that always gets me thinking about world building in the future is actually Friendship 1. And that's one of the episodes later in the series where they go to retrieve a piece of American space hardware that had been sent out. It was kind of a Voyager type story, a Voyager type story from the first movie. And just seeing how, this culture had found this device and it gets incorporated into the technology gets incorporated. And that's always something to think about, knowing that we do have 4 space probes that we've sent out past the sphere of the sun, and what's going to happen to them. And
where will they wind up?
Yeah. Where will they end up? Because one has the blueprint back to Earth and all that stuff. So I did like getting to see that kind of play in incorporating modern space, which is something that's always important to me, into the future and a culture kind of running away with it and what can come from that.
Awesome. How about you, Kira?
I think I love a lot of Voyager episodes, but I think one of the first episodes that came to mind when you asked the question was Scientific Method.
Oh, one of my favorites as well.
As someone who's worked in a lab, all throughout college, I worked in all sorts of different labs. That episode, and I'm still working with I don't want to say test subjects, but I'm working with animals and I'm working with things, and we're training and we're doing all sorts of conditioning with them. It kind of gives you that unique perspective of what it's like to be on the other end of a science experiment. And so I think it's that perspective is something we have to think about all the time. How are we caring for our animals at the aquarium, how we treat them, how they are portrayed to our public, and what kind of message that's sending. So Scientific Method is definitely up there for me.
Not to mention you get Janeway with her headache, careening towards the binary star. She's so angry. I love that moment. Lucy, how about you?
Well, I don't think I can pinpoint a specific episode or moment. I mean, I feel like the whole series, and I think you mentioned this, Amy, Voyager is literally an epic quest and all about world building. Star Trek is kind of about that too. But I would say that one of the moments that kind of hit me a little bit more than others in terms of Voyager being on their quest was when they first got that message back from the admirals and all the people in the Alpha Quadrant. And, Janeway has the opportunity to communicate with them for the first time. That kind of was like, wow, how must they feel in that time? They've been on this journey on their own. They have no idea, if the people home have been looking for them, have been trying to help them. And then in that moment, it seems like, their hard work has paid off in that moment. And in that, you can kind of feel like it'll be okay. So I kind of got that extra feeling of hope.
I love when Janeway says, 60,000 light years feels a little closer today. And I think that is a perfect transition to our next topic, which is this pandemic has been quite a situation for everybody. And we have been hearing from fans and from our friends that Voyager really feels more relevant than ever right now. Voyager was isolated in the Delta Quadrant. We've been isolating to keep each other safe. Voyager dealt with so many issues surrounding mental health. And we've all have been as a globe, we've all been concerned about how we're getting through this, what things are going to look like after, the long-term effects of isolation, of not getting a hug. We don't have a morale officer to bring us that needed boost. We have to get our boosts from stuff like this, virtual events. So I wanted everybody to kind of talk about, how you've been going through this pandemic, if you've watched any Voyager. And I know Garrett's been watching a lot of Voyager because he has a podcast with Robbie Duncan McNeil, the Delta Flyers. So Garrett, kick us off on your thoughts on the pandemic and isolation in 2020 in general.
Okay, before I get into that, I just want to comment on what Kayla said about the probes that NASA has sent out. I always feel like those probes are basically just targets. I mean, they're sent out. They're going to be intercepted by someone like the Borg, and this basically Independence Day is really going to happen on Earth because of these probes that were sent out, and they're going to go, oh, here's the blueprint of how to get back to that planet, which has so many lovely resources. Let's head there. It's almost like, whoa, don't send it out. Don't let people know we're here. So anyway,
well, there's still 4 months left in 2020.
They might ignore it.
They may ignore it. Exactly. That's true.
Yes. What did you say, Thomas?
I said there's still 4 months left in 2020, so maybe in November.
Who had alien invasion for November?
November, December-ish, pencil in alien invasion.
Oh, man, alien invasion, apocalypse.
Well, but let's face it, if that really did happen, if that scenario really did happen, immediately equality and everybody seeing each other as equals. At least all humans will look at each other as, you're an equal to me, right? There won't be this whole BLM thing where like, okay, because we are all going to have to be united as one, as humanity, to fight against the aliens that are trying to.
Nothing brings the globe together like annihilation.
Yeah, nothing ends black and white issues, Latino black issues, Asian white issues better than alien invasion. So
we've solved it, everyone. We've solved it.
That's the silver lining right there. The glass is half full. That's the flip side. But yes, you're right. During the pandemic, I just like everyone else, have been sequestered at home and trying to be as careful as I can. But it definitely kind of kicked my butt in gear, and my decade-long plan was always to do a podcast reviewing Voyager episodes, but it took until 2020 in the pandemic for me to really push that through. Megan, my significant other, suggested, why don't you call Robbie? And I'd always had Robbie McNeil, who played Tom Paris on Voyager. I'd always had him in mind as my co-host, as a possible co-host, but he's always been so busy directing. He has a whole nother career. He doesn't act any longer. He just directs, and he directs a lot of different television shows, and he produces as well. So he's very busy. And once the pandemic hit, Megan said, well, why don't you call Robbie now? And I said, oh my God, why not? And I called him, and he said, can you give me a day to think about this? I said, sure. And the next day he was like, I'm all in. And so we've been doing it ever since we launched our first podcast episode on May the 4th. So on Star Wars Day is when we launched Star Trek. Yes. Nice. And I thought that was apropos, with Star Wars being my first my entree into science fiction fandom was Star Wars. So we launched it on May 4th, and we've been going strong. I think in our second month, we came close to 100,000 downloads of our podcast, which is really wonderful. And we review every episode, and we have special guests, and it's a whole lot of fun, and it's available on all the different places that you can find a podcast.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go to Lucy. How have you been dealing with the pandemic? And your situation is a little unique because your husband is an ER doctor, and you have 3 kids at home, and you're bless your soul for having your 3 children home all this time.
It's been unique, to say the least. When we first sort of had our lockdown March, April, things were really, really hectic for us. My husband had a lot of extra work. It was sort of like, what is happening? How do we deal with this kind of thing? In my job, we kind of were dealing with similar questions. Do we see, non-emergent cases? Do we see them or not? Do we bring them in? All those kinds of things we had to deal with. And then eventually a lot of my kind of work got cut down because people were on lockdown essentially, so they were not coming to get whatever imaging study they needed unless it was an emergency. Whereas mine was getting cut down, my husband was kind of seeing a lot of the people coming in, needing to get checked. And then my kids, their whole world literally got turned upside down. I mean, all of ours, but they went from being in school, they had spring break and never went back.
Forever.
Yes.
That sounds like a dream if I was a kid. I'm like, I got spring break and I never went back to school.
But you can't see any of your friends.
Luce, how old are your kids?
So my kids are 11, 7, and 4.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So it's, we have a big range of experiences. So anyway, I'll try to rub it up, but sum it up, excuse me. But sometimes they have good days. They like that they're home. Sometimes they're really like, I'm tired of this. I'm done with this. So it's been a constant battle of trying to like keep them entertained. And they just went back to in-person school this week. So that's been another, thing for us to try to handle, keeping them healthy, keeping the staff at the school healthy while letting them interact with their friends and learn in that way.
Yeah. And do you I know you said you started introducing your daughter Liana to Star Trek Voyager, so that's been part of your pandemic experience.
Because I'm doing a rewatch, so I am not at the same episode that you guys are at, Robbie. You and Garrett are at. Excuse me, you and Robbie. Sorry, but I'm kind of in the middle of season 5, and so I just had it on, and Liana would sit with me, and she'd watch it, and she'd start asking me questions. So my daughter's 11, so she's the 11-year-old, and she'll be like, so why are they doing that? And, how does that work? And what does that word mean? And so I'm like, Liana. So on one hand, I'm excited to get her to introduce. I'm like, Liana, wait, shh, they're going to explain it. You got to watch. So yeah, I'm introducing the next generation to Star Trek.
Yeah,
Luce, sorry, Amy, can I just interrupt for a second? I know that that B'Elanna is a huge influence in your life.
Oh yeah.
So that almost sounds like that's almost an influence of your daughter's name. So Ileana was her name? Liana. B'Elanna. It's very close. And I'm surprised you didn't just name her B'Elanna right off the bat.
She didn't want her to be mad at her later.
It's funny. My immigrant parents, they always mess up names. And my mom's always like, how's Banana Torres doing? She calls her Banana Torres. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I'm sure Roxanne loves that.
Whoopi Goldberg is Whoopi Gopher to my mom. So Whoopi Gopher says that.
You gotta love the immigrant parents.
Yeah.
You gotta love them. We gotta love them.
You gotta love it.
So how about you, Thomas? You're over in the Bay Area where it is currently on fire. So you've added fire, tornado,
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about Star Trek and your pandemic experience, because I know it's been intense.
Yeah, it's been intense. A couple days ago, the sky was just orange all day. It was it's foreboding and scary. We're living out sort of the consequences of climate change now. It's not something in the future. It's something that's happening now. California's worst fire year was last year until this year. So everybody, I mean, that's a whole tirade, a whole diatribe,
but Star Trek Online has been keeping you busy.
Yes. Yeah,
you did a Klingon day. There's been a lot going on, at least, that we've been able to engage with.
We've been doing a lot of cool stuff with Star Trek Online. It's keeping me busy. A lot of people are, turning to games in this time because they really just don't have much else to do. So we've been doing our best to keep people happy, entertained, and kind of give them a break from all the terrible things that have been going on. We actually did a little giveaway to honor first responders and medical workers kind of early on in the pandemic. Gave them some uniforms and ship art and things like that. So we're doing our part. Worked with other. We did a fundraiser with Chase Masterson's organization. I think the Pop Culture Hero Coalition.
Yes.
It's like an anti-bullying organization. So we've tried to do things like that to keep people's spirits up and contribute, give back. But we had our Klingon Day of Honor. As far as Voyager, I just watched Macrocosm today. That's something that I really want to add to STO, especially now, is just a mission where you run around and shoot viruses.
Yeah.
This sounds like a game we all need to play.
Yeah, your character gets into Ripley mode and just runs around and shoots flying viruses. So we'll see. It's something I keep pitching. We'll have to find the time to do it because I think everybody's about done with all of this.
I think that's awesome, Thomas. I hope you pitch that to Al because we do need there should be like a first-person shooter, portion of STO that you don't have to think. All you do is shoot viruses. That's great.
I would log on and I would play the hell out of that. It would be really awesome.
Yeah. Because so the leader of the alien viruses could be called Covidia or something like that.
Yeah. I like this. This is good. We're really brainstorming. I like it.
Tell Al, Thomas. Tell Al.
Yeah, I'll bring it up.
All right, we're going to go all the way across the country to Kira. And Kira and myself are on the East Coast. Kira is right in the heart of it in Brooklyn, and I am a little further north in Connecticut. And we have, as a area of this country, we have locked it down. We have crushed some viruses because that's how New York do. But Kira, I want to hear about your experiences in lockdown and with your job where you're still going into work and Voyager and Star Trek. You've done a lot while we've been locked down.
Yeah, well, so while everybody else was locked down, I was still going into work. So my life
animals got to eat. I mean,
no, it didn't change that much because I was still going into work, and I actually got a lot of smack for it because people online would tell me that it just wasn't right that I was putting my life on the line for animals instead of people. I know, right? That's what I did.
Don't listen to the internet. Haven't I told you? Don't listen to the internet, my child.
The aquarium closed down in mid-March, and we were down closed until the end of June. So we actually just opened back up, or maybe it was July. I don't actually remember at this point. All of my timelines are blurring together.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been open for a couple weeks, but we've been selling out every day since we've been opened. Oh, no, it was the end of August. We just opened at the end of August. Okay, we got back to full staff at the end of June. Okay.
I was going to say, I think you just opened, but it's okay. We know time is a construct.
What's happening? But yeah, so we went into this rotating skeleton crew shifts. So team A and team B would rotate. So every other week I would have a whole week off. And so I was stuck in my tiny New York apartment. And right as the pandemic hit, I was actually rewatching Enterprise. And so I decided from then to go rewatch Voyager. And then I started watching DS9 and I realized my rewatches were going backwards. But I think for most of
Star Trek this way,
the special effects are getting worse and worse and worse. But
Kira, you're Benjamin Button and watching it. Yeah, you're going back.
But yeah, for most of the lockdown that I was in, for my weeks off, I was watching mostly Voyager. So that was a lot of fun, especially right as the podcast hit. So yeah, that was fun to watch along with you guys. And I read both of Kate Mulgrew's books. So that was a good Voyager bit for me because I hadn't read them yet. But yeah, my lockdown experience is unique from a lot of people because I was technically essential staff. They gave me a paper in case I got stopped that said, "Hey, I'm supposed to be going into work. I'm supposed to be traveling."
Take care of.
Yeah, because especially in New York City, I take the subway to work every day. I don't have a car, so it was kind of scary. And I know my parents especially were very worried about me. But
so, Kayla, you are also considered essential? Yes, but you do not have to go in.
Yes, we are considered essential. We all got the same little piece of paper from the government saying that we were allowed to be on the roads if stopped. Texas never went down as far down as New York did in their stoppage and their closures. But yeah, the 17th of March, they told us basically go get your computer systems, all government equipment. It's all set up right here that, normally would be a big no-no to take out of the building. And we're like, work from home.
Take it.
Yeah. And there are times when I'm actually doing stuff that's literally supporting live the International Space Station now from my home. The worst part about it actually isn't the teleworking part of it, but in Mission Control, I'm used to having like 6 computer screens. I have 2 now. And so it's a big change in not having all the real estate. But, for me, I live by myself. So I get my social interaction from going to work and playing hockey, and all of that's X right now. There's no going to work, there's no hockey. So, I would go months where I'd only left the house for like 20 minutes a week to go get food. Yeah, and that's it. So when we had Hurricane Laura come and they said it was going to hit us one day, I had a few coworkers come help me board up windows, and it was the biggest celebration in the world because like people.
You're like, hurricane's coming, but who cares? There's people here.
Yeah, things are starting to get a little bit better, and now I'm allowed to go on site for an hour here, an hour there, because the crew's still in space. We're still sending up new crews, so we have to keep moving, and there's just new restrictions on how to safely do that. But yeah, for me, it's always felt like the Star Trek Voyager episode 1. Where the crew's all sleeping.
Yes.
And then had to keep working. She was all by herself because, and that's where I was. I was having to do my job, and I'm at home, and my 4 cats hate me because I'm always home all the time. And it was just to the point where, I was getting that anxiety of just, I'm by myself all the time. My family all lives in Washington State. I just so disconnected. To me, it always felt like that episode where you're going insane, but you still have to keep that crew safe.
I'm really glad you brought that. I'm really glad you brought that episode up because I think it's a great analogy again for what we're going through right now. And also, just Voyager has always been really great about focusing on mental health issues and, the crew and 7 of 9's journey, and I definitely want to segue into our final section of our topic, which is talking about race and gender, because I feel like Voyager has some areas where it could have risen a little bit better, and Akira's going to talk about that. And then other areas, I'm going to ask Garrett a little bit about his experience as an Asian American actor in Hollywood and in Star Trek. And we're going to just talk a little bit about these issues that are still so relevant when it comes to issues like Me Too and Black Lives Matter and women's movement and everything that, especially I know that Kate, for those of you who don't know, I work with Kate Mulgrew. I work on her website, and I help her with her book tour and her scheduling and all that. And it's wonderful working with her. And she has been getting so much feedback from people like Stacey Abrams and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and just women who are in leadership roles that have come into it because of Captain Janeway. And Kayla, I know you're a huge Janeway fan. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about B'Elanna. We're going to bring everybody in this last 20 minutes or so before we start take audience questions. So I would really like Kira to kick us off and talking a little bit about being queer in a STEM field that is really dominated by cis white men.
Yeah. So shark science in general is very, very much dominated by, cis white men. And so I remember even just being in labs at college, how hard I had to fight. And back then I was still presenting as a woman. So it was very hard to just get a spot in a college lab with some of the older professors in the marine sciences portion of my college. And, my parents always said, hey, squeaky wheel gets the oil. And then I'd retort with, well, the squeaky wheel is also the first one to get replaced. So, but then I don't want to say I made things worse for myself, but things
you were yourself and other people didn't.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what it is. I became more in tune with who I am, and the world suddenly got a lot harder. And what I thought had made me feel so free was suddenly like a ball and chain. And so I've worked several jobs before getting here to the New York Aquarium, and at each one I've kind of had to suppress that part of me, just because it was for mostly appearances. People didn't want, they just didn't want it. They didn't want to know, they didn't want to deal with it. And so it was very hard working with, I guess, toxic team members, because it was just something that they didn't want to deal with. And I felt very isolated. I felt very a part of the team, not a part of the team. I felt very like a different part of the team. And then I got here to New York, and suddenly I'm surrounded by team members that I feel very comfortable with, and each and every single one of them does their best to respect my pronouns. When they talk about me when I'm not in the room, they're still using my pronouns. They correct each other. And I like being around them. And it was very overwhelming for me to suddenly realize that I had a group of people I could actually call a team and that I could be a cohesive member of. So especially when Voyager got stranded out in the Delta Quadrant and they were all just stuck with each other and no one else, and they came together, Starfleet and Maquis and all, 70,000 light years from home, that they had to become a cohesive team. And that really helped a lot. But what didn't help was I think Voyager really dropped the ball on queer representation. And I mean, you can say that about most Star Trek series. We didn't really get any kind of LGBTQ plus representation until Discovery. But I do think there were some portions of Voyager that you could kind of hit or miss, kind of fan theory, slide it in there. I was actually just thinking about the episode Author, where the doctor is actually fighting for his right as a hologram to produce his own book. And you can actually use it as an allegory for trans rights. And that was something that was really important to me. So being a queer person in STEM is hard, but it's definitely getting better, especially when I'm surrounded by people I enjoy working with and people who enjoy working with me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that part of your journey. And I know that, like you said, representation on Voyager has, and on all of Star Trek, it has been a climb as we go through our own social upheaval. And Star Trek has always been a commentary on social justice. And I think that being able to see those allegories, even if it's not outright present, is still very valuable for fans. And I'm glad that you spoke a little bit to that. And I wanted to, stay within that same area, but also switch over and go to Garrett and have Garrett talk a little bit about his experience as an Asian American actor in Star Trek, because there are not that many of you in the main casts, and also in big franchises like Star Wars and Marvel. That representation is still not really where it needs to be. So I'd really like to hear you talk about, where we were and where we're going and what your hopes are.
Yeah, it's very interesting. When you talk about Star Trek as created by Gene Roddenberry really did he did try to push the envelope. He was a groundbreaker. I know that the original pitch was that the first officer of the original series was supposed to be a woman, and they canned that. Right. So they were back then, the NBC just said, no, absolutely not. And that was the 60s. But he was able to get in a communications officer who was an African American female. He was able to put in an Asian American helmsman. And so those were the first real non-stereotypical roles, I think, at least for an Asian actor in Hollywood. And also
between you and George Takei, there wasn't really a lot in Star Trek, and it was nice to have Harry back in there and be repping the communications officer.
Definitely. But it took 30 years for a woman to be in command from that original pitch in 1965, 66, when they tried to have a female first officer. It took 30 years later for Janeway to materialize on our TV screens. And it was difficult because the day that we premiered, January 16th, on a Monday, on Tuesday, the production office voicemail was filled with people that were channel surfing, not Star Trek fans per se, but just channel surfing, and came across Voyager and saw that we had a female captain and decided to leave their comments on our voicemail of the production office. Yes, and it was yes. This is pre-Twitter, so they were tweeting via voicemail, and the voicemails were all the same. They were all the same. It was one person after another saying the same thing. How dare you? How dare you allow a woman to be in command? How dare you? You should be ashamed of yourselves. Other people, we had death threats. Someone said that I'm going to come down to Paramount Studios and blow up your sound stages and kill all of you because you allowed a woman to be a captain on your show. And that kind of shows to me kind of like 1895 thinking in 1995. And for as first world as this country, the United States of America is, as first world as it is, it's sort of third world when it comes to gender relations. It really is. Like we're the only first world country that hasn't had a female leader.
I know.
If you look at Germany, Germany's led by a woman. England had Margaret Thatcher. All these countries, they've all had their share of women in politics.
India has had a female prime minister.
It's just the U.S. It's just this old school Quaker mentality. Puritan thinking. I don't know what this is. Yes, and it's just so annoying. But it is. I think Star Trek is definitely a breath of fresh air when it comes to diversity. As Kira said earlier, there's definitely more ground to cover, especially when it comes to LGBTQ, representation. There needs to be more of that for sure. But I'm just thankful to play a role that's non-stereotypical. I didn't have to do martial arts on Voyager. I didn't have to deliver Chinese food on Voyager. I didn't do a lot of stereotypical things that you see Asian actors sort of pandering to. So I think as it is, Star Trek is making the right moves and will continue to make progressive moves in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Garrett.
Sure.
And I wanted to go over to Lucy and talk a little bit about your experience seeing B'Elanna as a Latina woman in STEM. And how really rare that was in the 90s and how you didn't really get there was no one else. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about
sure.
that.
So I'll try to speak quickly. I'm from Brooklyn, so I can do it.
No. So we're gonna go until 5 after the hour for our talking,
okay,
and then we'll do 15 minutes of questions. So
okay, good. But
we have time.
Yeah, that was pretty much, you pretty much summed it up. I was one of those nerdy kids. I was really into science from the whole. I knew I wanted to be involved in medicine, and B'Elanna Torres was the first character that looked like me, that actually was of Latino origin, background, that was in a high position in science, not just like, sort of involved, did some stuff here or there, but she was the chief engineer. And I was like, whoa. I was like, that's going to be me. And so she was just really instrumental in sort of building that confidence, sort of seeing that character there. And I think she said this quote, I have it on the shirt, it says, nothing is impossible if you want it badly enough. Mm-hmm. And that kind of became my mantra, throughout my middle school years. I started out, I think 13 when the show came out, so it was at that pivotal time when you needed role models. All throughout college, the road was not easy. I'm still in one of those fields in medicine where it's majority men. I think it's equalized now in terms of in medical school, it's a little bit more, maybe 52, 48% women to men. But in radiology, there's still probably only 20% are women. So
I remember, so Lucy and I met because she loves Scully from the X-Files.
Oh, yeah.
And she was on my panel on Data Scully.
They were my two.
They were your two ladies, and you said to me, I remember when we first met and we were talking about our first panel together, you said, oh, they always think I'm the nurse.
Always, constantly. Like it never registers that, I could be the doctor or, that I am the doctor. And so that kind of thing is the same thing, like with she's the chief engineer. So, maybe they never thought that maybe she would be chief engineer, but, her character just spoke to me, and it, sort of in the way that we've all been saying, Star Trek has really been that leaps ahead, kind of that support system for so many people that want to identify with a character, and that has kind of helped them out throughout life. And especially for me, because I was both a woman and a Latina, that character, and then Roxanne also being of, Hispanic, Latin ethnicity, I was like, oh my God, it was like a double whammy. But that's kind of my tie to it and my experience to it. And I want to take a little shout out and say hi to my mommy, because she's watching, and I come from like a very long line of matriarch. It's like essentially a matriarch. There were like 5 generations. I grew up with all women, so girl power.
That's awesome. Yes, girl power. Well, Kayla, talk a little bit about girl power and a little bit about how your experience has been a little different from some of ours. You told me about the men in your life who've encouraged you and who fostered your interest in Star Trek and science and mechanics and everything.
Yeah, so I was 10 when Voyager came out. I was already pretty much a Star Trek fan from life. But I remember just falling in love with Janeway pretty quickly. The one scene where she kind of gets up in Chakotay's face when they first beam over to Voyager the first time, and she's just, you're going to treat my crew as you expect me to treat yours. And to have him just instantly back down from that. That was like, okay, that's my girl. I like that. And then the next episode, her and B'Elanna are just talking back and forth technobabble about how to get out of this singularity they're in. And all the boys are like, wait, what's going on?
Work particles.
Like, and I was hooked at that point. I was like, these are women who are leaders, respected by men, and they talk about science. And I was growing up with my dad and my grandpa who never told me no because I was a girl. My dad was re-roofing the shingles on the roof. I was up there with him. He didn't say, you're a girl, get down. You know, I rebuilt a 1930 Model A with my grandpa. Never was told no. And I played men's sports like football and hockey and stuff. I've just been a tom girl my whole life, or tomboy my whole life. And yeah, I had a math teacher who was a man who was like, you're really into Star Trek. How about you learn what's real and what's not real? And here's a book by Carl Sagan. And so I had that influence, and, you know, my advisors in college were all men. And so along the way, I've always had really more male role models. And I went to a small private school where there was 3 of us in the physics program that graduated at the same time, and 2 of us were women. So I've always had this, I've never seen that you're a woman, you can't do it. I've never seen that unproportionate men to women resource ratio, because even at NASA, you know, we're pretty solid. You know, maybe like Lucia was saying, you might have it like 55-45, so it's just slightly off. And so I've been very lucky. I'm very fortunate, and I don't want to discount anyone who's had those struggles. But that's one thing that Voyager really was, I think, instrumental for me, and hopefully young men out there that was watching it. The way Chakotay reacted to Janeway, the way all the men reacted to Janeway, it was always showing women that you could be respected for your brains, for your leadership, and that people can disagree with you and it not be misogynistic or sexist and be treated that way. And so you learn a lot from the men as well, the male characters.
Yes, and
well.
So I'm going to speak to something that you just said, because it felt very interesting to me that you and I have had kind of like opposed experiences where, yes, my dad was, he used to be a general contractor. I was out there. I'm the one who recocks the tub. I'm the one who does stuff around the house because I sat, you know, I paid attention and I learned, and he never told me not to learn something because I was a girl. But I actually went to an all girls private high school, and it was actually a really great experience for me because we were told that we had very high expectations put on us. You know, academically, we were expected to succeed. You know, I was expected to maintain that level, and we were in competition with each other, yes, but it was also kind of an environment where we fostered a community. And I really loved my high school, and I loved my English teacher, Ms. McBrin. Shout out. She was the best. She was the one who fostered my love of storytelling and my love of feminist literature. And when I, you know, going through college and experiencing what women experience in the workplace, especially, you know, I worked in technology at big tech companies for about 12 years before I branched out, and now I have my own business. And the first month I was at my first job out of college, I had a guy call me. He was a couple offices down the hall, and he said, "Can you go up to the supply closet and get me a binder?" And I said, "Why?" and I went over to my my boss, and I said to her, "Is this normal? Why did he ask me to get him a binder?" And she goes, "Oh, I think the torch has been passed from me to you." And she had been with the company for 20 years, and he would still do stuff like walk past the fax machine and ask her to send a fax for him. And it was like stuff like that that's marked my career, that has really, I tried to get back into the tech world after I taught college for a little while, and I was done. The level of just of misogyny, I was just done. And there was a really interesting article on Janeway that had popped up on the Mary Sue by Madeline Clark. It was celebrating 25 years of Janeway, and there was a great quote in there where she talks about, even when Voyager's writers stumble into sexist tropes, the characters they created never seem motivated by misogyny. In the world of the show, at least, Captain Janeway exists on her own terms. And I think that was just a really good summation of how I felt coming into Voyager and how I felt seeing a female captain for the first time. And I think that this whole fostering this environment, it's not just something that we have to do as women. It's something that the men on Voyager did. The men on Voyager were, and I heard you guys talk a little bit about this on the panel that Garrett had for DragonCon last week, where they mentioned, how they work together as a team and how they work together as a family. And I had talked previously with Thomas about being a manager at Star Trek Online and how he was encouraging an environment of, an environment of non-toxic masculinity, of inclusivity. And I kind of wanted you to just talk a little bit about that, Thomas, if that would be okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as the token cis white male on the panel.
That's right. You're a token white boy. I told you. I did want to say just first off to everyone out there who's like me, it costs you nothing to be empathetic and to listen to other people and to understand that not everyone has the same support system and opportunities that you do. And just to give people who look different from you and have a different background than you, express their gender differently than you're used to, like, give those people the benefit of the doubt and just let them, be true to themselves. It doesn't take anything away from you. It doesn't diminish anything you have. It doesn't, rewrite your history or what's important to you, your beliefs. Like, just, if you have a certain background in this country, you are lucky in ways that you don't ever realize. And honestly, instead of making America great again, let's make America great for everybody. By extending the same the same privileges and rights and latitudes that I get as a straight white guy. Like, if everybody had that, was operating on that level, the country as a whole would be whole. We wouldn't have this strife and these divisions. And it's work from people like me to make that happen and to advocate for it. We have to. I'm speaking to people in the audience. We have to listen, and we have to shut up and let people speak to their experiences and tell us how how they're hurting and what we can do to make it better. And that just starts with listening. It's really simple. So I just had to say that, being in a position like this, and I respect everyone on this panel so much and all their backgrounds and everything they've gone through to get where they are, their expertise, professionalism. It was just important for me to say that, it's not hard, guys. Like, and I'm speaking specifically to men. Like, it is not hard to just listen and just be a friend, be empathetic. Yeah, and infinite. The key phrase of Star Trek that everybody loves to throw around when is infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and that's not about tolerating intolerance. That's not what that phrase is for. That phrase is to understand that you don't have to go to the Delta Quadrant to meet exciting and strange to you, new civilizations, new peoples with amazing beliefs and cultures. You can just go next door. You can just go online and interact with people that you might not know about, or get outside your bubble and seek out people who are different from you and listen to them. Seek out new life.
Right.
Garrett wanted to mention something, I think, in conjunction to that.
It's just in earlier. I just want to say, listening to my fellow panelists and their divulging of the age they were when Voyager started. So Luce was 13, Kayla was 11, and Kira was 1.
I
feel so old. I'm like, oh my god!
You're never.
You don't look it.
You're the forever.
You don't age.
Thomas, how old were you? Thomas, how old were you when Voyager started in 95?
Oh, well, I'm 37 now. I don't remember. Was
You'd
it
be
2001?
Okay,
12.
so you're around the
11
same
or
age.
12. You're on the same age I was.
Yeah.
So the elder statesman is loose with her 13-year-old, self watching that. Everybody else. But also, Luce, I have to tell you, for this Halloween, I'm going to suggest that you do a mashup, a hybrid character, and I want you to dress as B'Elanna Scully. So half Torres,
She is
half
on it.
Scully.
She has got it. She's got
I'll find a way to do that.
Good.
So thank you everyone for talking about those topics. It was so important. And I want to kick it over to some audience questions. We are going to take the first question. I really think that this one's for Kira, actually. I think we're going to do this one first. Barry asks, for Kira, who would win in a fight? A shark or a giant salamander?
Ooh, well, I mean, you're talking about, I don't know. I feel like the salamander might have more of an advantage here because it can go on land and water. But like in the water, totally the shark.
Yeah.
Is this a warp 10 salamander or just a normal Earth salamander?
I'm not discriminating against any salamanders. I'm including warp 10 salamanders right now.
Okay.
In water, shark. On land, probably the salamander.
Okay.
There's a difference of environment. We're talking to a biologist here, it's like a very specific. But we have another question that has come in from Fuyu. How did you celebrate Star Trek Day earlier this week? So let's see who wants to go first. I'll let volunteer. Go. Or I'll call on you.
I made a wallpaper featuring all the different Starships Enterprise. Distributed that to STO players. That was fun. I actually had the day off work, but I still ended up doing something Starship related too, because I love Star Trek and starships and things like that.
Work in real life are just like this. I moved. I actually we closed on our first home, which is why I'm in this weirdly lit environment. So I moved on Star Trek Day, so I'll forever remember the day we moved into our house. But how about you, Garrett? What did you do on Star Trek Day?
I was watching CBS's broadcast of all the pre-recorded Star Trek panels, so I just wanted to see how the one I did for Voyager turned out, and they edited a lot out. So I think they're gonna, because we talked for over an hour, and I don't think that was an hour. That was like 20 minutes almost. It seemed, So they did say that they may use some of that other, content for other bonus footage or something. They were going to use it in another date, but we'll see if that remains to be seen. Yeah.
I hope so.
How about you? What did you do, Kira?
So I actually went home to see my parents in New Jersey. My dad asked me to come home for Star Trek Day because Star Trek is something that is shared in my family. So he asked me if I was coming home. We wanted to watch the CBS panels, and we couldn't cast it to the TV for some reason, so we were watching it on my mom's tiny iPad. 3 hours straight. I think my eyes were killing me by the end, but it was so good.
I'm glad we all were watching.
Me, my mom, and my dad all sitting on the couch watching the iPad. It was
I made it in time for the Voyager panel. The movers had left, and I was texting Thomas. I was like, I can't get it up. We don't have internet yet. So it was all just cell phone powered, but we watched it. Lucy, what did you do?
That was a good big day for us. I worked, but it was the first day my kids went back to school in person. So I took them to school. I came home. I watched some Voyager, and then I went home. I went to work for the second half of the day.
Nice.
Awesome. Kayla, what did you do? NASA extraordinaire?
Yeah, I ended up missing all the Star Trek stuff. I ended up putting like a 14-hour day at work because we were trying to get something ready for the crew to actually execute on Friday. So I was just one of those days where work was everything, and I was really trying to do something for the crew at that time. So
you were doing real life.
You were being a real Star Trek Starfleet officer. You're a real Starfleet officer.
Unlike normal people, I have off Tuesday, Wednesday, so I was able to watch Star Trek stuff. Otherwise, I wouldn't.
Nice.
All right, we have a question now from Victoria. This is a really good one. I think Lucy should lead us off, and also Garrett. How can I encourage my children to pursue STEM?
All right, that's kind of an interesting one. I kind of have a few different points I can think of. I would say just kind of make it available to them.
Oh, your sound cut out there a little bit. We'll kick it over to Garrett, because I know Garrett. How would you encourage kids to use STEM?
I honestly think that the key is really just to get them into Star Trek, to start watching more Star Trek, and that will influence them. Because if you think about it, look at the influence that B'Elanna Torres had on Luce, and look at the influence that Janeway has had on Kayla. I mean, there's this. Just watching the show, period, I think is the best way to influence these kids to go down the path of a STEM career. Luce, are you back? Is your audio? Okay.
I think I'm back. I'll just make a quick comment. I think we could all comment on this, but I would just say support them in any of the fields that they're interested in. Kind of make sure that they have all of these things available to them in any kind of medium. So like Garrett said, TV, if you want to give them books, if you want to, encourage them to be in their backyard and play with dirt, that kind of thing. Just make it available.
Get dirty.
Yeah.
And that's true, Luce, because like each kid is different, right? Yeah. Like how do you reach every child? It's not one way, right? Some kids would prefer to be out in nature doing something, and somebody else would rather be at home watching an episode of Star Trek. So it just depends on how you approach it, and it could be a different tactic, right, for each kid.
Yeah. Kira, you had something to add.
Yeah, I did. I mean, and I don't have kids, so maybe.
No, but we still value your opinion as a person of STEM.
STEM is great, but if your child is interested in something that's not STEM, I wouldn't try to crush that from them. Like if they're interested in doing art, or if they're, doing something with a creative medium, maybe they want to be a producer, maybe they want to be a director for TV that does Star Trek. I don't know. Encouraging your child to pursue STEM is great, but if they show other interests, I would kind of, I would encourage whatever they're interested in.
Correct.
Yes, I was a huge reader. My mom would always take us to the library. I would check out like a huge stack, and nothing was ever discouraged. So that's always that's, like you said, whatever they feel that their strengths are. Thomas, you wanted to add something?
Just to piggyback on what Kira said, Leonard Nimoy gave a commencement speech one time, and he said that he was telling a story about giving a cab ride to John F. Kennedy, and they were having a conversation, and Mr. Nimoy told, I think Senator Kennedy at the time, that he was an actor, and Kennedy said, there's a lot of competition in that business, but there's always room for one more good one. And that's always stuck with me, just in terms of being an artist, because I'm an artist, and so even if they don't want to be in STEM, if they want to do something in another field in the arts, which thank God for the arts. I mean, where would we be in this pandemic without them? Without movies and music and TV and all this. But it's all about what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, and if they can cultivate that interest into practice and skill, I'm sure they could accomplish whatever it is they want to accomplish.
We have another question from Ifan. Where and when would you go on the holodeck? I like this question. Where and when would we go on the holodeck? Let's see. Kayla, I think I might know where you want to go. Kayla, maybe Mars?
Yeah, I could do Mars. I mean, if I had a holodeck, would be awesome. I mean, I would be like recreating the Miracle on Ice, and I'd put myself on the team so I could play. Together, like Steve Bobby Orr's flying score, like in the stands. There's so many things you can do with a holodeck, whether it's history, whether it's flying to M42 to see what it looks like up close and personal. Like, yeah, I just,
that'd be really cool. Highway to the Danger Zone. I feel like right now I miss traveling really badly. I think I would go to Paris and go sit down and sit at a cafe and have a Jean-Luc Picard moment. How about you, Lucy? Where would you go?
All right, I think another little tidbit about me is I love Regency. I'm another huge Jane Austen fan, huge. So I think I would have to go back to live and spend some time with Jane Austen.
Oh, cool. That's a great idea. Garrett, how about you? Where would you go with the holodeck?
Probably July 1969, and I'd walk on the moon.
That's great. You get to go.
I'd love to experience that. The first people to.
I feel like Kayla's heart grew 3 sizes.
She did. She clapped. She's like,
Come to Johnson. I'll give you a behind-the-scene tour. I'll let you see it firsthand.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, that's so great.
Would you get on the ladder before Armstrong just so you could say that you were the first?
Yeah, I just sort of like push Armstrong to the side.
Right.
How about you, Kira? Where would you go?
That is such a loaded question. I mean, there's so many places I want to
Let's keep it PG, y'all.
I mean, I've always wanted to travel to Indonesia and do some scuba diving over there. I mean, maybe that's the nerd answer for a shark biologist. I don't know, but I mean, that's definitely something I would want to do over there.
What about you, Thomas? Okay, sorry, I thought you weren't done.
You're good.
Yes. Thomas, where are you going?
I've always been a fan of the Napoleonic War era mythology, Horatio Hornblower, and that actually has informed a lot of Star Trek too. There's a lot of that kind of naval history in Star Trek's DNA. So, but it was really a brutal time and kind of a terrible. If you were a sailor on one of those British warships, you were not having a good day. So seems like a good place to visit in the holodeck with safety protocols. But not something I actually want to go to.
Kayla, did you weigh in on where you went? Did I miss you, or did you say?
Yeah, I went first. I was talking
about. You did.
Lamar.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Like I said, time is a construct, and my house is in disarray. All right, last question, and then we're gonna wrap. We're gonna tell everyone where to find us online, and Garrett, you're gonna tell people how to access the podcast. But first, the question from Takana M. What message would Harry Kim and the rest of us give the people of Earth to get through this pandemic?
Wow. I would
now,
probably
Garrett, speak for everyone.
No pressure. No pressure.
It's not the destination that counts; it's the journey. That's a nice Harry Kim quote.
The real voyage is the people we met along the way. I would say wear a mask, everyone. I want to go to conventions again. Please wear a mask. That's what I would say. But yeah, anyone else have any parting words of wisdom before we wrap up?
I'd just like to say one thing. I would like to let people realize that it's okay to have down days. It's okay to be stressed out. It's okay to be anxious. Like a lot, because sometimes, we hear these messages of everybody like, oh, I'm doing this during the pandemic, or, I picked up this new hobby and now I'm an expert on this, or etc. Right. And there's some of us that, don't have the energy. Some of us have gotten depressed. Some people, have a lot of other things to do. So just don't be too hard on yourself. Everybody's just trying to get through the day.
Yeah,
for sure. Anyone else? Kira, Kayla, Thomas, do you have anything to say?
No, just wear a mask, please.
Yeah, wear a mask. Amy, can I do one quick go back to the STEM question?
Oh, sure. Quick.
Yeah, so I would just say my number one thing I notice is kids get discouraged because of math. They love science, they love engineering, but they're scared of math. Mm-hmm. Failure is an option. It's okay to get
failure is an option. That's like
it is okay to fail a math class. I failed calc twice before I finally passed it.
And you work for NASA. This is the good inspiration we need.
It takes dedication. So if you have a passion for it, don't be scared of the challenge and the math. Just fight for it. Get extra tutors. Get extra help books. You'll do it, and you can make it.
So why don't you lead us off, Kayla, and say where people can find you online?
Okay. The best way to find me is on Twitter, and you can find me at Mars_Kayla.
Great. And Thomas, where can we find you?
I'm also on Twitter at Thomas the Cat. Just Thomas the Cat, all one
word. All right, Lucy, where can we find you?
My Twitter is Luce X-Ray MD. So LUZ as in zebra, XRAY M as in Mary, D.
Good job. I can tell you've done that before. Kira, where can we find you and perhaps buy a t-shirt?
Oh, right. Well, both my Twitter and my Instagram are actually different, so I actually wrote them down.
Perfect. Sharkosaurus for Twitter and Shark Trek 1701. Well, so with the 1701 is I am now Amy Imhoff 1701 all over the place. And Garrett, close us out and tell us how we can watch Delta Flyers.
First of all, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page. I also have on Twitter and Instagram. It's my name at Garrett with an R, my middle name initial. So GarrettRwang on both Twitter and Instagram. And the podcast itself, you can find on Spotify, iTunes, any place that you find
there it is, right below.
There you go. It's the Delta Flyers. The Delta Flyers. We also have a Twitter page, an Instagram page, and we have a subscription service where you can subscribe to get bonus materials through Patreon, and that's patreon.com/the Delta Flyers. And I just want to quickly say that just dealing with this pandemic, just for everyone to realize that this too will end. Right. So this is not something that we're going to go through for the rest of our lives. It may seem like that right now. And also for people to remember that the universe as a whole, as an energy, is always conspiring to put your best interest in forward. All right. So everyone's best interest, meaning that there will be things that happen that you're going to wonder, dear God, why is this happening to me? Okay, something negative, something like a hurdle that's thrown in your way. All those hurdles are there because you have to hit the hurdle first in order to have some type of growth in your life. Okay, when you hit that hurdle, realize that every hurdle is thrown in your path in order for something amazing to happen in the future. That future may be a few days from now, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. You don't know when, but just hang in there, okay? Hang in there. Don't give up on the fight. Just stay with it. That's the key.
Oh, thank you, Garrett. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much to Left Field Media and Awesome Con and Rose City Comic Con. You guys have been awesome and wonderful to work with. So thank you, and have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. This has been awesome.
Bye. Live long and prosper.
Yes, live long and prosper.